Welcome to another program in our Business and Society series. Our guests today are Dan Roselli from Packard Place, he's co-founder, and Sara Garces Roselli, also co-founder of Packard Place. So I get the idea that you two are connected in some way or another.
That's true.
That's true, all right.
We are. Thank you for having us today.
I'm really excited about doing this program on the ethics of social entrepreneurship. And is business up to the challenge? I think that's the title of our program, or what we decided on. And I was wondering, for the benefit of those of us, and that includes me, who really don't understand what social entrepreneurship is, if you could better explain it and show us how it's evidenced, perhaps, in your own company, Packard Place. So, Dan, would you like to start off?
Sure, and
Okay.
Rosie, thanks for having us here today.
Oh, we're happy about it, yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, in its simplest form, social entrepreneurship are entrepreneurs, but their companies have some social good component to what they do. There's something positive that comes out of what they're doing. So all entrepreneurs do good things because they're creating jobs, but these companies have a specific focus on creating good, a specific mission for that. They're described in a lot of different ways. Sometimes they're called triple bottom line companies. Sometimes they're called social mission companies. Sometimes they're called B-share companies. So triple bottom line companies are focused on people, profit, and planets, or sometimes called some positive social impact on that. And I'll let Sara talk a little bit about Red F, but for Packard Place, it's interesting because it's the Uptown Entrepreneurship Center in Uptown Charlotte. So Packard Place is a for-profit company, but part of what we do is we take some of the proceeds from Packard Place and it funds the nonprofit mission of a corporation we founded called the Garage at Packard Place, which provides help for entrepreneurs to get started, mentoring, support, co-share space. So it's a balance of profit and positive impact.
Okay, well that makes me cheerful, that it's just not about profit, but it's about people.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things about Packard Place that I think is really unique is that it's really designed to help entrepreneurs at a lot of different levels. So from the very point where they're starting up their organization to entrepreneurs that have a little bit more established company that already are very interested in focusing on, people and the planet in addition to making money. The other thing about social entrepreneurship companies is that they can be for-profit companies or they can be not-for-profit companies.
Could you explain the difference between that?
Well, for-profit companies obviously are
Right.
very fundamental to our society.
Right.
Large companies we all are familiar with,
Right.
like a Colgate
Yeah.
or
Coca-Cola.
General Mills, Coca-Cola. Those
Yeah.
are all for-profit companies. Not-for-profit companies would be organizations like United Way, Goodwill Industries,
Some hospitals.
Some hospitals. So there's a lot of different organizations that focus on the greater good, but in a way where they're not making profit for themselves necessarily, not for a shareholder.
I see, yeah. All right, I know both of you are very, very passionate about social entrepreneurship, and I wonder how you got passionate about it and just, didn't blow it off or something like, I'm not into that. Now, Dan?
Yes. So for me, I think part of that journey started actually in my college experience. I actually went to Michigan State University, but I was able to join an organization there called Alpha Kappa Psi, which is a co-ed business fraternity that teaches business ethics and leadership to college students. And it's actually a wonderful chapter of Alpha Kappa Psi here at UNC Charlotte.
There is?
There is. It's the largest international business fraternity in the world. It's 220 chapters, hundreds of thousands of members, but it talks about being responsible business people, that how we succeed is as important as the fact that we do succeed. And so I think that really resonated with me and formed, colleges are obviously very formative years. I think kind of really helped me form who I wanted to be as a business person.
And for me, one of the reasons why I got to be very passionate about this is because I spent most of my time after I graduated from grad school working in large corporations. And one of the things that I found very inspiring about many of the companies was how much emphasis they put on a specific social mission that was geared towards their brand necessarily. So for example, like Colgate-Palmolive, I spent some time working there. They have a program called Bright Smiles, Bright Futures, where they help kids who don't have access to dental care, proper
Right.
oral health, in order to, have good mouths essentially, and to have good oral health for their overall health in the long run. And I always thought that was a really awesome idea. And once I became an entrepreneur, I thought how important it is to continue that philosophy in our own organizations, to actually focus on helping the people in our organization and people outside of the company, but at the same time giving back to the community in a way that makes sense for us and for our associates. And it's one of the things that I'm passionate about in every company that I've ever been part of, is to help advance the culture of the company so that people in the organization feel passionate about something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be what I'm passionate about, but what they're passionate about, and giving them an opportunity to have time away from work in some cases through paid volunteer time, so that they can spend time on their passion and give back to the community at the same time.
I know at UNC Charlotte, the chancellor has, issued a paid leave to do volunteer work and so on and so forth. And I think it's a great idea. It was very recent, and I thought, fine, this is forward thinking, and so on. Dan, you seem to have had a special calling to this endeavor. Could you tell us more about it?
Yes, so it's interesting. I think even as Sara and I founded a number of companies, we always wanted to have companies that we were really proud of. And we would do employee surveys. And one of the things we said, if I couldn't ask employees any other question, if I had to rely on just one question to ask them, the question would be, are you proud to work here? Because if you're proud to work here, all the other fundamentals underneath are probably taking care of themselves. And so, for example, the companies that we founded, even though we're a smaller company, we've always wanted our benefits to be in the top 10% of all benefits.
You mean like health benefits?
Health benefits, regardless of size, right? That's very unusual for a smaller company to do employee matches on charitable contributions, to do matches on 401k plans, which we still do and didn't cut during the Great Recession. And then Packard Place was interesting because as Sara and I have been, and I think we've worked very hard, but we've also been very successful. The discussion we started to have is, what impact do we want to have on the community? What legacy do we want to leave? And I think for Sara and I, Packard Place is part of that. It's doing something that we hope is hugely positive for our community that wouldn't have been done if we didn't pick up the banner and go do it. And I think that's a lot of what motivates us, is that we want to give back. We want to have a positive impact and do it in a way where we're passionate about it and we're probably uniquely qualified to go do it.
Wow. That really is heartening, or inspiring and so on. Sara, you think that social entrepreneurship is good for business. You think it's good for capitalism. And before the show, I said, do you think it's good for ethics? Spend a lot of time telling us all about that.
Well, one of the things that I think makes it good for business is that if you as an organization are able to talk to people about giving back to society, that helps associates be very proud of the companies that they're working in, but at the same time, it creates an opportunity for companies to participate in sort of the greater good, if you will. I'm a person that believes that, our government cannot provide all of the resources and all of the infrastructure for our society to be successful in the long run. I'm a big believer in the fact that we need to have, public-private partnerships and individual partnerships to do all of the things that we aspire to do in this country and around the world. And social entrepreneurs get that. They really understand that they need to not only have a business model that's successful, but they need to do something to give back to their internal associates and then to their customers outside. And then on top of that, how are they doing something good in the community? And there are lots of different examples of companies that are doing that and that have been founded and started in order to give back to the people and the planet, and then obviously to their own pocketbooks in the long run. But in doing so, they're also being ethical business people because they care about things that are beyond the almighty dollar, if you will. You know, I'm watching a series with my son and my daughters that's called America, The Men Who Built America on the History Channel. And one of the things that strikes me about Andrew Carnegie is that he realized at one point in time that while he was a very wealthy man and he was making a lot of money, that didn't make him happy in the long run. And it's one of the reasons that he was driven to start libraries in the United States for people to enjoy, and basically created the public library system in our country. And so you think about an entrepreneur who took, you know, an idea to give back, and he created opportunities for people who couldn't necessarily afford books to further and advance their own education through reading. And, you know, it seems like a simple premise, but without access to that, could the greater population of the United States have had access to all of the books that he had in his own personal library? You know, so that's an example of an old-time social entrepreneurship example. But I think it also transcended, you know, his own ethics, because he had some issues in his business life that weren't so great, and that helped to change his image. Well, he was in the steel industry, and he didn't always take care of his workers, so there were high levels of injuries and things like that. And I think that was something that bothered him in the long run. Whereas today, I think companies start from a fresh perspective, and they say, okay, how do we want to treat our associates, and how do we want to make money while we treat our associates well and be good stewards of our resources, and then how do we work in the community to provide, you know, opportunities for individuals or organizations, like Packard Place, for example, where we're trying to help entrepreneurs to advance their businesses and grow so that they can then create jobs in the Charlotte marketplace.
Which would be a great thing.
Exactly.
We need them. We need them a lot.
Right.
Now, I want to go back to the point, Dan, where you said you provide ample benefits for your employees.
Sure.
I mean, I find that very interesting because of all the controversy that's going on now about healthcare. You know, whether or not small companies are really going to provide healthcare, or whether they're going to get out of the healthcare business and not do it because it costs a lot. So, and I find it very interesting that you're able to sustain a high level of benefits during this point of time. I mean, so many other companies say, no, we don't want to do it. Obviously, they're not social entrepreneurship hasn't hit their consciousness yet.
Well, and I think there's a balance there that, as Sara was explaining too, historically people would say you are a not-for-profit, or I'm a for-profit capitalist country, and the only thing that matters to me is making as much money as possible, environment be darned, people be darned. And I think what we're realizing as society becomes more global and we understand what's going on, there has to be a better balance than that. And that pure greed-based capitalism won't work. But capitalism is the economic engine that drives our country forward. Sara and I work extremely hard in our businesses. Our employees work extremely hard, and they run a very profitable company. That allows us to go do things like provide them great benefits. So it's a quid pro quo of, yeah, you have to go run a good business. That provides us the opportunity to do those types of things for employees, and they do it because they work hard at it.
Right, that goes back to your motto of, are you proud of who you work for? And also, are you happy you're working for us? Are you well treated? I really think if you're not well treated, you're not going to work as hard. You're going to find ways to pay the employer back.
Right.
You know, whichever way it is, loafing on the job, or you know, that type of thing. Okay, I'd like to get to more specific things so our audience gets a better sense of what's going on in Charlotte or even the larger region. What are some of the companies in Charlotte that you think are banner holders for social entrepreneurship? And let's understand a bit why. So maybe each of you have some examples.
Yeah, I do. There's a couple umbrella organizations that I would point to first. There's a great organization here in Charlotte called Queen City Forward, which is a incubator just for social entrepreneurship companies. So their mission is to help other social entrepreneurship companies get started, to make sure they're on the right track, to provide them mentorship and guidance. And they have, I think, 20 or so companies under their wing. There's also an organization here called Social Venture Partners, so people who are trying to foster social entrepreneurship companies. They run a program, once a year competition called Seed 20, and it just happened about a month ago. And so in the second year they held the competition, and all of those are social entrepreneurship companies that are competing in order to get funding from Social Venture Partners. And they held the competition, and 20 companies, all Charlotte-based, all social entrepreneurs, just wonderful, wonderful companies in what they're doing, ranging from rehabilitating people who have criminal records and are trying to be employed, to fostering positive self-image for teenagers and youth, to how to regrow or use like Grub to Grub program, where they're actually growing food in the food deserts in Charlotte. It's the full spectrum of where somebody sees a social problem and they do what entrepreneurs are doing, saying, I can use my innovation and my hard work, and I think I can go solve that problem.
It's interesting to me, before I go on to Sara, how companies choose their cause. I mean, does that happen at the higher level? Does that percolate upwards? Who has a vision for, one of these endeavors?
I think for most social entrepreneurs, it's very similar to a traditional entrepreneurship story. They're consumers, they're living in the world, and they see something that's wrong. And they say, I know a better way of fixing this. I can build a better mousetrap. And I think they're called to want to have a positive social impact. And I think, so the answer, it comes from the founder, which is they see something in their life, an area they know about or something that has moved them, and they say, I know I have a way of going and solving this.
Yeah, and I can get the capital or the money to do it or something like that.
And that's why those organizations are wonderful. Social Venture Partners and Queen City Ford, as they help companies get the means to be able to move forward on their mission.
Wonderful.
Because sometimes people don't always have, the personal financial resources to be able to start something like that. So they have to look to other places.
Do you help them, or?
Well, and that's the point of things like Seed 20 and Social Venture Partners and Queen City Forward, is that they are there to help and assist with, trying to find access to capital, things like, providing mentorship and providing space resources and things like that. So at Packard Place specifically, we're helping with space as well as mentoring for people like that. But another great example of a social entrepreneurship company here in Charlotte is Goodwill Industries.
Oh, Goodwill.
It's sort of the quintessential. It's sort of the quintessential social entrepreneurship model, and it was started a long, long time ago by an individual who saw people, waiting on bread lines and things like that, and they didn't have money to buy clothing, and so he thought about wouldn't it be interesting if people were to donate their, clothing that they couldn't use anymore. And then he started fixing it up and then reselling it to people for a very low amount of money. And in doing so, he provided employment opportunities for some people who were out of work. And what that's evolved to today is all of the Goodwill stores that we all know and love and we donate to.
Right.
But what many people don't realize is that Goodwill's primary mission isn't as a reseller of goods. It's to help people find employment opportunities.
Really?
Who are either former, they may have been in prison, they may just be unemployed, they may have come upon hard times. Goodwill's mission is really to help people find jobs, and it's through the power of work that Goodwill is successful. And it's so fascinating to me to see that organization succeed really on its own, because the money that they make in the stores provides the resources for them to be able to provide job creation programs.
Oh, I never knew that. That's really terrific explanation of Goodwill.
And let me add one thing to that, because I think Sara hit on an interesting point of the difference between a charity and a social entrepreneur. A charity relies on donations or other things to support it. Social entrepreneurs create a viable, sustainable business model doing positive good. Like Goodwill Industries does get some support, but at its core, they have a business model that works, that generates revenue for them to fulfill their mission of job retraining and skill enhancement. And that's the difference between a social entrepreneur and a charity.
That's helpful. Another thing I was going to ask you too is, or have any people you look up to as heroes or heroines here in Charlotte when it comes to this? Dan?
I think there's certainly, you'd almost take any company in Queen City Ford or in the Seed 20 competition. I just think they're marvelous people. I remember sitting in the Seed 20 competition this year, and company after company, founder after founder coming up. And it sometimes makes you pause and say, you know, I'm just not doing enough, because they are wonderful companies. But one on a national scale that sometimes gets left out too often too is even Newman's Own. If you remember, Paul Newman, 20, 30 years ago, was way ahead of his time before even social entrepreneurship was a concept. Said, you know, I can take some of this Hollywood fame that maybe I don't deserve or came to me by accident, and I can go create a company which will, over time, has created millions of dollars of benefits back to people. And you look at how Hollywood celebrities or other people use their fame in different ways and arguably less productive ways for society. And I think he's been a great role model for decades about how to use his positive influence on a social entrepreneurship company and use his likeness to drive that forward.
Yeah, I'm a great admirer of him too. Sarah?
I was going to say, not necessarily specifically in Charlotte, but it has come to Charlotte finally at the beginning of, or at the end of last year, as a company called Grameen America.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Which, you know, my hero there is Mohammed Yunus, who started the Grameen Bank internationally. And then he asked the question, could this model that I've started around the globe be replicated here in the United States? And lo and behold, he was able to replicate that model and started in New York City with lending small amounts of money to underprivileged, basically, very poor people who had a business idea but who had no access to capital. And through giving them those loans, they have been able to have seed money to start their businesses. Most of them are lifestyle businesses, some of them are not. But those individuals now have a way to provide a path out of poverty, which is something that our system doesn't necessarily provide for people. And the most amazing thing is that at the end of last year, we opened a Grameen America branch here in Charlotte. So Charlotte now has about 90 individuals in the Grameen America Charlotte branch who are benefiting from loans and financial education, and who are starting their own businesses here right in the Queen City. And the thing about Grameen America that I think is similar to Goodwill is that, again, it's an organization that is sustained through the loans that are provided, the interest that is paid back on those loans is used to continue to give more loans to more and more and more individuals. And it's a model that is sustained within itself, and it does not rely on, you know, lots of external donations to keep itself going.
I have a question to ask about Grameen. Didn't it first start out internationally?
It did, yes. It started in Bangladesh. And Mohammed Yunus studied here in the United States, and he went to Bangladesh, which is his home country, and there were several women in a village that were talking about, you know, wanting to be more efficient in whatever business it was they were doing. And he had an idea, and he said, well, I wonder if, you know, I were to give them, I think it was like $50 that he started with.
Microloans or something.
Right, it is all about microloans. And he gave, you know, a few women a very small amount of money, and he found that they repaid the money, dollar for dollar, 100%, back to him. And then they proceeded to borrow more money, and they were able to grow their businesses to the point where today many of those women are able to send their daughters and sons to school where they couldn't before, or they are building schools in their own communities because they now have the resources to do that. They're creating jobs for other people in their communities through some of their businesses. And it's an amazing model that, you know, kind of starts with one and then goes out into the community and creates many, many opportunities for people through just one person getting a loan.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying, that government need not be always the solution, that business is a large part of the solution. I mean, that model is incredible, one person. What kind of businesses were these women in?
Here in the United States, most of them are doing things like they have baking businesses, they might be seamstresses, they might be you know, using a talent that they have in weaving or jewelry making or something like that, and then selling their products. Some of them do hairstyling, provide in-home childcare businesses, lots of different types of things like that. And the beneficiaries of Grameen America are primarily women at this point.
Yeah,
There
I
are
know
some
it's
men.
sort of a feminist cause or a woman's cause, and I'm very interested in that. So I'm glad you mentioned Grameen. I'm glad you mentioned the other companies too. If we wanted to leave a little message to our audience, what would your message be, Dan?
I think it's to try and get involved in some of these social entrepreneurship companies. You think of Grameen America, or you think of the work that Queen City Ford is doing, or social venture partners
Or
we
even
talked
Goodwill.
about, or Goodwill, that by putting money in, it becomes a self-fulfilling virtuous cycle. That $10 you put in not only gets paid back, but becomes more money. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed by the concept of, oh my gosh, how do I get involved? I would encourage everyone even to do one small thing. Come to the Seed 20 competition next year. That's all you did. Spend an evening, bring your kids, come to the competition and listen to what's happening. You don't need to go radically change your lifestyle. Just take one positive step forward in helping social entrepreneurship in Charlotte.
Sara?
I would say that people need to remember that there is tremendous power in one. There's always power in many, but if each one of us don't take action in some way from a social perspective, whether you become an entrepreneur or not, we are losing an opportunity to make an impact and a difference in our society. And if we can set an example as an individual, then others will be inspired by the things that we do and may take the initiative to do the same. And I think that's one of the things that we have tried to do, is to just inspire others to engage in their community in whatever way they have capacity to do so.
Small is good.
Small is good.
And you really can make a difference. Sometimes students say, oh, well, I can't make a difference. Your message to them is, oh, yes, you can. And it just takes one activity to do so. So if you had, say, you gave the example of going to the SEED program. Do you have an example of what, like, I could do?
I think
Since I'm entering retirement?
something as simple as when you clean out your house, remembering that, you know, Goodwill is there and that your donations to them are providing job opportunities. Or if it's, you know, when the Boy Scouts come and ask you for food for Second Harvest, to remember that there is an opportunity for you to help a social venture succeed, because there are people out in the community who care and who are willing to come to your doorstep and collect the food, or, you know, resell the donations so that they can do greater good. So, you know, even simple things like recycling can help the greater society.
Yeah, we've gotten better about recycling. We got the message, like, we can do that. It's not hard. It's easy, you know, just separate the stuff out. And I'm proud of us for finally doing that. We were very negligent before. Well, I can't tell you how much we enjoyed having both of you on the program today. I really feel like I learned a lot, and I'm glad that Packard Place is here in Charlotte doing so much good. And I hope you have a very, very successful future, and you bloom and you grow, and everybody knows you in 5 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rosemary.
Thank
It's
you.
good to
It was
be
good to
here.
be here.